Okay, so I would like to just first of all say I'm so excited that I have a chance to speak to one of the best headshot photographers I know of, and I'm sure you don't need much of an introduction for most of people. People who don't know you probably I don't know, they probably living in some different worlds and stuff. But I've been knowing you for so many years, and I have to say that you really have huge impact on my work. And before we actually even get into the final interview and all the questions what I want to ask, I just want to say that I'm extremely thankful for what you've done, not only for me, but I think for the entire community of headshot photographers. I'm extremely appreciated, all the help, and that's what something which I've been struggling a lot. That there's a lot of photographers out there who never share their work, like they never share their
Hmm.
secrets, and they never share what they achieve, and how to help some other people. So I'm really grateful that like I think you break the spell a little bit, and you were the first one who actually start sharing their information, sharing the knowledge, and I think that impacted a lot of people out there. So that's the first thing. And before I jump into my questions, we spoke a little bit beforehand about
Hmm.
this, but how you're doing with recovering of all your
I'm
stuff,
doing.
which is going.
Yeah. I'm doing good. Well, thank you for the kind words too. By the way, it's a lot of people in the photography world inspired me in the beginning. So any chance that people tell me I've inspired them or helped them, it's always makes you feel like life is worth living. So, yeah, my recovery is good. I shattered my leg in the motorcycle accident, and it broke into about 7 pieces, and the doctors were miraculously able to put everything kind of back together. So it's not your average broken leg, but
Mhm.
it's coming along. Where it's too soon to tell whether there's going to be any permanent side effects. There's parts of the leg that I still can't feel, and but through time it should all come back. Everybody's given me good, all the doctors have given me good feedback as far as how it's healing. So
So are you
I'm watching.
shooting already, or are you still kind of?
I'm actually kind of starting to a little bit more. Most of my work is playing catch up right now with some hotel photography.
Mhm.
It's not a lot of headshot related stuff at the moment. I had a bunch of hotel clients that were kind of waiting after I got in the accident to get better. So I've got
Mhm.
to get them taken care of. So I'm going to New York in the end of April to
Oh,
finish a
nice.
job there, and then up to Connecticut to photograph a aviation company hangar and terminal up at a private airport there.
Oh,
So
cool. So you're not going on your bike to the New York, hey?
no, no. Probably gonna give the bike a rest for a little while.
Okay.
I gotta wait for we're kind of in the middle of some legal stuff with that, so I
Okay.
no bike for a little bit
Cool. Okay.
at
So
least. So
perfect. Okay, so the first question, and this is something which I always had in my mind, and this is what I want to ask you. Would you mind and tell me a little bit and walk me through the entire process, how you actually got into the cinematic headshots? Because this
yeah.
definitely unique style. You actually own it because whenever I post my stuff, people always refer to you. So I'm just like, okay, this guy actually just put himself in the kind of
Well,
history of photography that this is your stuff, and now people just kind of copying you. So there was something like this is something what I want to ask you, like, was it kind of overnight idea, or did you develop this over the time? Like, if you could just give me at least some
yeah.
details.
I think well basically what ended up happening was I started off shooting in my apartment against like a white sheet or something when white sheet, couple umbrellas, it's like you just starting out. And I just didn't like it. So I had been following a lot of natural light photographers. One of the guys that took my headshots when I was in acting school, he worked a lot with natural light. So I started kind of shooting outside, and I liked that much more. I was shooting up on my roof, and but I what I didn't like was the lack of control.
Hmm.
Anybody who lives anywhere where the weather is an issue, sometimes it's cloudy, sometimes it's sunny, I just wanted to have a more consistent look than I found I was getting outside. And so, Joe McNally was a big inspiration on me. His Hot Shoe Diaries and principles of off camera flash kind of helped me formulate this.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a real big fan of cinematography and movies, and I've been watching movies since I was a little kid. So a lot of the inspiration obviously came from cinema. But I wouldn't say that I was on a specific mission to
Mm-hmm.
create some sort of look. It was really just born out of a sense of necessity, maybe. So
Mm-hmm.
I started using one flash, and as I started kind of figuring out how to balance the ambient and the flash and get that kind of cinematic look, it started to slowly evolve. And then once I hit it, it was like I looked at the back of my camera and I was like, "That's what I want to keep doing,"
Yeah.
So I was memorizing times a day and
Mm-hmm.
camera values that made that happen. And what I found was every time was a little different. A cloud will go over and it'll change the
Mm-hmm.
exposure, or the sun will come out. So I was doing a lot of playing around with but that's basically kind of how it
Mm-hmm.
stumbled onto it. I never called them cinematic
Oh,
headshots for the
okay.
longest time. Um, I a lot of my clients, when I would meet for consultations, would look at them and go, "Oh, these look like film stills. They're so cinematic." And so I would describe them like that, but there was never the cinematic headshot until the tutorial came around,
Okay.
and we were trying to figure out what to name it.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through tons of different names and ended up settling on that, and that's kind of what it's become. But while it is kind of something that I've I guess, popularized. A lot of you guys, yourself included, Christian Webb, there's a bunch of guys all making it their own, which I think is really good too. So
Yeah.
it has, it lives in a similar world, but headshots in general will always kind of live in a similar ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be, for the sake of the industry, they all kind of have to be a certain thing. So
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
I don't know that it's it's certainly something that was at the time nobody was really shooting. Uh, they were either shooting outdoor natural light or they were
Mm-hmm.
shooting indoor studio. Nobody was really mixing the two.
Mixing the stuff. Yeah.
Um, Not that I knew of anyway. I get a lot of grief sometimes because people will go, "Oh, you didn't invent how to
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know
yeah.
shoot
Well.
stills outside." It's like, no, I realize I didn't invent anything. It's
Yeah.
more just in the headshot world, there was nobody really doing what I was doing
Yeah.
at that time. So
Well, you
um,
definitely took that to another level, and what really like turned me into this idea was that I was able to shoot pretty much anywhere, right?
yeah,
And then like I don't own studio, which
yeah,
now I see that I don't really need a studio, and then most of my clients, they want me to come to their place,
yeah.
and then this concept basically allowed me to shoot like in like offices,
It's all,
hallways, anywhere,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
It's
that's what
always
people
the
are getting
ugly stuff
so.
that looks good out of focus.
Yeah. So okay, so my next question is, and well, I'm sure you have a lot of photographers who inspire you. So who's your inspiration? And it doesn't have to be headshot photographers. Who is the guy or person who's like you really look up to and you getting
Oh man.
inspiration from? I know probably the list is
Well,
long, but let's say that.
yeah. There's a lot in terms of what inspires me probably the most on a cinematic level is Gregory Crudzen's work.
Okay.
Uh, I've always, if you're not familiar with Gregory Crudzen, you should be. He does really high level productions, and he ultimately brings in a movie crew to set up a scene and photograph it
Okay.
like it was in a movie. So
Oh wow.
obviously stuff like that really gets me going. I'm a big fan of Joey L's work. Um, I really enjoy Zach Sutton's work.
Hmm.
His beauty photography and lifestyle stuff is really great. Same with John Shell. If you're not familiar with John Shell, he does really beautiful lifestyle work, and he always. I'm a big fan of expressions,
Hmm.
and it doesn't matter to me really what type of photography it is. If
Hmm.
you're photographing a person, uh, I've never really got the point of shooting somebody if you're not going to capture a great
Mhm.
expression of them. So John Shell creates amazing expressions. I mean, there's a whole host of other people I could go on and on about. Chris Knight does amazing portrait work. Um, yeah, it's
So you actually
but
just jump into my next question,
yeah,
and I just want to ask you about. Can you tell me the recipe for a good headshot? And the reason I'm asking is that every headshot has a lot of components, right? And whenever I found for the last or several months, whenever I started posting stuff, um, people ask only about equipment. Like nobody
yeah,
ask about
that's
face expression. So I just want to hear from the guy who really understand this
it's
entire thing. What's the recipe for a good headshot?
I mean, at the end of the day, we have to look at what a headshot is and what it's used for. Nine times out of ten, if you're photographing somebody in the acting community, a headshot's going to be looked at for maybe 20 seconds.
Mhm.
So it's a very important component of an actor's business, but it isn't the be all end all. At the end of the day, the headshot is supposed to get them called in. Their resume and their talent needs to book them the role.
Mhm.
So the headshot can open a door, but it's so when we talk about components, the headshot is really meant to sell somebody, and it's not going to be something that's looked at as a portrait, that is analyzed and body. There's a lot of components I think that make a headshot unique, but um, I think it all boils down to expression. I mean, at the end of the day, if you got 10 seconds to get a an impression of somebody, then the expression really needs to hit home. And so for me, it's less about camera and gear as it is about if somebody can really truly see human expression and those micro expressions and know when something's there and when something's not. I For me that makes all the difference in the world. The technical stuff can always be uh, I think that there's people who have a natural ability for capturing and seeing expression, and then there's people that have a natural ability for technical, lighting and composition and all that stuff. So to get the two of them together, I think really kind of, that's the holy grail for a headshot
Mhm.
photographer, because I do believe that to a point, not just anybody can do it. Headshot photography takes a lot of just being able to talk to a lot of random
Mhm.
people and engage people on a level that gets them very comfortable very quickly. And sometimes that's a personality thing. It's
Mhm.
I'm not a wedding photographer because that's just not my personality. I
Mhm.
want to take more time with things, and weddings
Yeah.
are too chaotic for me. But I really admire a lot of wedding photographers because it's a lot of constant creativity on the fly that
Oh,
I have
totally.
to kind of sit and think through a little bit more. So um, yeah, at the end of the day, it all boils down to expression. If you can see that, then the rest of
You,
it will
you got
fall
on
into
the good
place. The
path,
more
right?
practice you have.
Perfect. Completely agree. And then I think that's what hooked me up on headshots. That I had a little bit more time because I'm coming from like the wedding photography. I shot weddings
Mm-hmm.
for almost 6 years, and then that's what actually just threw me
Wow.
off at some point. That there was just a constant chaos, like constant
Yeah.
running after the people, and
Yeah.
there's no time to really kind of thought this through. It was just like shoot, 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 and then and I don't know, maybe I was doing this the wrong way, but I found with the headshot I have a time to play with different things, and as you said, looking for the perfect expression, different
Mm-hmm.
ideas. But with the weddings was, but what I've learned from weddings, which I really appreciated, like the experience what I got, that I could work fast because
Yeah.
on the weddings, like you have to just be on the ball
Yeah.
like literally all the time, right? So
Yeah.
okay, so the next thing what I want to ask you is retouching, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
huge discussion about retouching nowadays. There's, I would say, two different sides. One, people just really falling into like every image has to be retouched and has to be kind of, I would say, take to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
There are some who completely disagree and saying when it comes to the headshot photography, nothing should be retouch or edit it. So I hear kind of both sides. Like my personal take on it, like you have to do something because there's some imperfection which
Sure.
need to be looked after, and then taking that image to the next level always kind of benefits the
Yeah.
client and you, and kind of you can show completely different work. So what's your opinion on that, and what's how you approach this whole thing?
Well, my my opinion, I think retouching is something that kind of evolves, throughout your photography career. I mean, I was doing retouching, one way early, and then now I do it differently. So I
Hmm.
think I think ultimately everybody's in different places with retouching. With regards to headshots and how much retouching gets done, there's a lot of haters that look at my work and think it's over retouched. Um, I'd be happy to send any of them high resolution files. Sometimes a lot of things get lost in translation on the web, and at the end of the day, what I like about the cinematic approach is we're effectively using the same thing that they would use in film, which is big soft light.
Hmm.
If you ever want to get a good study of that, the movie Meet Joe Black, the cinematographer, I was kind of heavily influenced by the lighting in that because everybody looks gorgeous.
Hmm.
Big soft light solves a lot of problems when it comes to retouching, but it also, you know, uh, when it comes to the aperture I'm using too.
Hmm.
We're shooting, 190, 180 to 200 millimeters at 3.2. That also solves a lot of retouching problems. You
Yes.
get focus fall off on the face that kind of naturally smooths things anyway. So, um, and I don't think it's inaccurate.
Hmm.
I think what the ultimate goal is to make sure that people still look like themselves, and I take great pains to make sure that whoever I'm retouching still looks like them after I'm
Hmm.
done.
Oh yeah.
A lot of times I'll take the day or the night and look at it the next morning before I send it off to make sure I haven't done too much. My wife works and used to work in theater a lot. She still does, and so she'll double check me
Hmm.
sometimes to make sure I haven't gone too far. Um, but ultimately, I also don't want to spend more time in front of a computer than is
Hmm.
absolutely necessary. If tomorrow the industry said, "Hey, we don't want to retouch any actor headshots ever again,"
Better for
fine with
us, right?
me. Yeah, I mean, it's just less stuff I have to do.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think that you know I I think that as you get better at photography, you do less and less
Yes.
retouching, or your retouching is just even more subtle. I'm not gonna lie, I was probably more heavy-handed in the beginning, but techniques and things evolved, and I think
Yeah.
any good photographer will tell you the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Absolutely.
evolves with your, the more you understand the craft, the easier it becomes. Um, you know, in terms of technique, there's always the people that are like dodge and burn
Yeah.
or frequency
Friends with her.
separation. I actually like both things.
Yeah.
I don't know why they can't both live together. For me, I use frequency separation on people. I use it on hotel rooms. I use it on architecture. I use it on all kinds of things, and it really is a big time saver in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
Dodge and burn is always going to be king. If you really want the high end, beauty look, that's where you got to go for it. Um, I think, excuse me, I think frequency separation has its place. You just can't do too much of it, which is
Yeah.
why I always kind of tell people, look, do a lot on a separate layer and then scale back the opacity of that layer to something that's reasonable. Because sometimes it's faster to
Yeah.
do a lot more quickly and then bring it back than it is to try and do a little, bit at a time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my personal approach. Everybody's got to find their way.
Right.
I'm big on skin tones too. I
Okay.
find when it comes to retouching, if you're not capturing the person's skin tones, then you're not capturing them accurately. So
Yeah.
I find myself desaturating oranges and yellows a lot, and
Hmm.
things like that to get a more natural skin tone. But that's also something that
That's
has
personal, kind of.
evolved over the years.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it is a personal choice. I think at the end of the day, Photoshop is a mountain, then there's
Oh, yeah.
many different ways to get to the top of it. So
Yeah, yeah. I absolutely agree. And I think also, after a while, we're getting more efficient, right? We see way more thing. And I think there was a one day where I remember we had this conversation. I retouch image in the night, and I would look in the morning, and I was like, "What the hell I've done?" And you told me that, before you send it out, just wait at least 12 hours. Look over again after a while, just to kind of see, because we just completely getting lost.
yeah.
Sometimes, how far we push this stuff.
And
Awesome.
your eyes get tired. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that if you're retouching 5 or 10 or whatever images, by the 10th one, you're like
yeah.
bloodshot looking at so you got to kind of take a step back and make sure it's all good. And I do that. I apply that to all my work. It's not just headshot work. I do that with my architectural
Sure stuff.
stuff as
Yeah.
well.
Perfect. Okay, so I want to go back a little bit to the face expression, because that's
Mm-hmm.
something what is, I think, extremely important, and a lot of people forget about it. And I know, throughout even your workshop and tutorial, you have some also kind of specific kind of look you're going for. And then I've noticed that there's again some discussions, over amongst the hatchet photographers, that some people like, smile, some people like look more, kind of subtle look. And I
Mm-hmm.
think also what is, I want to actually point it out, and I want to discuss this with you, because we had this little conversation actually, I think a couple of weeks ago, about this beauty fashion type of style of,
Yeah.
expressions where, people look really dull, and there's I would say there's no expression. So
Yeah.
what's the kind of expression which, how I can even describe this? Like, what would you recommend as far which directions we should go? Is that comes down to also personality of the person, or what the headshot is used for? Like,
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
Well, so that's kind of like a three-part question. What I So to start off, I mean, expressions are about two things really. They're about your eyes and your lips.
Mm-hmm.
You can be bang on in the eyes. The expression can just be really great and intense, or whatever, or happy, or even a smile. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be there in the eyes and ring true. But if there's awkward tension in the mouth, it's going to throw it off.
Yeah.
A lot of times, when I'm talking about the whole different, I'm kind of big on having people keep their mouths closed unless they're going to smile. Occasionally, a mouth open works, but I oftentimes find it's like if I'm looking at you like this, and then I drop that mouth open, all that power from the shot just falls right out onto the floor.
Yeah.
So I find that the minute people do that, it just drains the life out of their eyes. Now, there's a lot of people that will also say that judging good expressions is subjective. I would agree with that, like to a point.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's obvious issues where expressions are could be better or could be stronger, and it's subjective only to the point of where when a photographer starts looking at better and better expressions, they start to look at their old work and go, well, I
Mm-hmm.
wish I'd have done it better with
Yeah.
that person, myself included. I mean, I look at a lot of my older work and pick it apart just as diligently as I would pick apart my current work. So um, I think when it comes to headshots, the whole confidence and approachability thing is a phrase that gets thrown out there a lot, but it's really true. I mean, you don't need even actors necessarily don't need a huge range of expressions. It's that you need something that's confidence is what's really
Mm-hmm.
sexy. Basically, at the end of the day, is as crappy as this sounds, sex sells, and confidence is what's truly sexy. It's not what
Yeah.
you look like or any of those things. It's about how grounded in who you are, and how you can portray that. So what
Mm-hmm.
I'm always trying to get is people to get very grounded in who they are, accept who they are and what they look like, and work with confidence through that. And that's a big part of the acting world too. Um, working with confidence in anything you do is really the kind of key to success, and it's what draws other people to you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're constantly second guessing yourself or questioning your abilities, even if you don't know what you're doing, then people are going to pick up on that. So for me, I always try and get smiles and good serious expressions in every
Mm-hmm.
session that convey a client very grounded and very confident, and but without having that air of kind of arrogance. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
there's some, and that for actors, I tend to look at the subtleties. So when I go through a session with an actor, I'll say, oh, this looks like you just slept with your best friend's wife.
Mm-hmm.
You got that. There's it's a little angry in the eyes, but
Yeah.
you got a little smirk going
Yeah.
on there. It's like, oh well, she likes me better than you.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So I'll try and I think the more you look at expression, the better you get at finding the subtle differences in a session.
Mm-hmm.
I think if every photographer went through all of their images and tried to cast that person as a character for each expression and really put some thought into what that character is, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to help you better see and better just have a creative mind about finding expressions.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have to be accurate. I tell my clients this all the time. I say, look, you could be looking at me and thinking about what kind of groceries you're going to get tonight or something, but if you're present and really in there, expressions are open to interpretation in that sense, but the expression still has to be there. If it's not there and you get this blank look,
Yeah.
then it's not doing its job. The lighting. I think a lot of times what happens is photographers are very self-serving about the images that they showcase. We want to showcase images with the best lighting, the
Mm-hmm.
best composition, the
Yeah.
best hair, everything's perfect, and then ultimately sometimes they forget to compare that expression to all the other shots,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it turns out to not be the best expression to showcase. So
Mm-hmm.
I try and hold myself to that same standard. There's times where I've gone, oh, I wish the kicker light was a little bit not as bright or not too dark or whatever it is, but the expression's so rocking that it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
With regards to the fashion world, I'm probably going to get in some trouble for saying this but I really don't care.
I can cut that
I,
off, so don't worry.
I I love fashion photography. I love the technicality of it, and I love the compositions and the you know the I guess the challenges in making it. It's a difficult genre and one that I respect a lot of photographers who work in it. What I can't get my head around is it doesn't matter if it's if you're photographing a person, let's say so fashion photography, the idea is to sell clothes, I'm
Yes.
assuming, right? So a lot of times people say, oh well, we don't want the model's expression too great because it's going to pull attention from the
Mm-hmm.
clothes. And I go, well, if you show me a model that has an expression that's just rocking and they're wearing these clothes, that's going to make me go, man, I want to wear that suit,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
or I want to wear that dress, or I want to look as fierce as she does in that lipstick red dress, whatever it is. Um,
Absolutely.
so I think there's a place for better expression in fashion work, but
Mm-hmm.
that's where the industry is, and I can't come. That's a world I don't know the business of. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, those situations were at, the photographer's at the mercy of, a creative director or an art
Company, yeah.
director or an ad exec or an art buyer or something. So, sometimes we don't have control over those
Mm-hmm.
things, and I don't want to, knock them too hard on it, but it's like, how many pictures can I see where it's just like,
Yeah.
I just, I don't know. I'd like to see more interesting expressions from that world of
Oh,
photography.
absolutely.
But I'm sure that they have plenty of gripes about other areas too. So
Yeah,
we
yeah,
could complain all day about
yeah, yeah.
what's what. But ultimately, I think if you're going to photograph a person, let's get something interesting from them, even if it's when we talk about smile shots versus serious shots. I think a lot of times that's the difference with corporate work.
Mm-hmm.
So with corporate work, I try and get more smiles from people because that's ultimately what the company wants to sell,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what they tell me the company tells me they want to sell. They don't want anybody looking too serious,
Mm-hmm.
because they got to be approachable. So a great smile has an arc to it, just like a story does.
Hmm.
You've got the rising action and the climax, and then the falling action. And I find the best smiles happen just before or just after the climax.
Yes.
And so trying to get people to laugh and capture that. But to me, smiles tend to be more they're kind of more universally the same. A
Hmm.
great smile is usually a great smile, and everybody
Yeah, yeah.
knows it. Everybody can look at it and go, "Now that's a great smile." There's more subtlety and variation and interest to me in more serious
Hmm.
expressions. So that's kind of, and they're also, they can be a lot harder for people. Some people come in and they can't keep from smiling,
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know
absolutely.
and some people don't want to smile at all. So you gotta, that's a nice challenge to try and kind of coax out,
Yeah.
those expressions from either person.
Yeah. Did you
I
have
just find.
sorry.
Yes, sir.
Did you
Go
have a
ahead.
chance to actually I was just talking on one of my vlogs. I just recently had a chance to read the book by Vanessa Van Edwards, and she's like a psychologist, and she talks a lot about the microphase expression and how to
Mhm.
recognize them and stuff like that. Amazing book. I highly recommend it. If you have a chance to,
Okay.
I'll send you. And she actually talks a lot about fake smiles, and she actually
Yeah.
just break them into, like, just different components, how to recognize them. And
Yeah.
the funny thing was, like, when you start really reading her stuff and kind of watching, she's got some amazing YouTube channel as well about those
Mhm.
informations. And I look back on my shots, I'm just like, holy smokes, like half of my shots, they have fake smiles. And the
Yeah.
funny thing is, what she was saying, that even, they look like smiling, and, kind of the way we see it, but our brain kind of just basically reads them completely different. That, the
Yeah.
brain knows there's a fake, right?
Yeah.
And I found this is so interesting because, we just sometimes push people to smile, and they faking
Yeah.
it, and then, like, when you look at the shot, like, you see this things, right? And it's kind of
Yeah.
scary at some point because, that reflects your work. And then when you see back, I was just like, holy moly, that's just bad.
There's a thing about, I personally never tell any of my clients to smile.
Okay.
I tell them, if you're gonna smile, let it happen, and if
Hmm.
you're not, let it go.
Yeah.
And if you are gonna smile, make sure, if you're gonna laugh, make sure you lean forward and bring your chin
Yeah.
down when you laugh, and not go like, because
Yeah.
then I
They're
can't
done.
go. And that usually makes them laugh in the middle of explaining to them
Yeah.
this. So that kind of helps loosen them up. I think the lady you're talking about is right. The more headshots I look at, I can spot fake smiles in like 2 seconds
Hmm.
now. And I'm picky about it. And
Hmm.
I want to be picky about it because, like I told you before, it's about eyes and mouth.
Hmm.
So a lot of times people get wrapped up in the eyes, and the eyes are great for the smile, but the mouth is like,
Yeah.
they've been holding that mouth for like 3 minutes now. So um, it, it's all a matter, I think, of looking at your own work objectively, but
Hmm.
also really studying people. I think a lot of times, and I teach this in my in-person workshops. We touched on it a little bit on the tutorial, but I really encourage headshot photographers to put the camera down and go out into the world to a bar or a park, um, and really just study people and let people's expressions affect you. And I think it could also be beneficial for headshot photographers to take some acting classes so that they
Hmm.
understand what actors are doing in front of them. But that also applies to everybody else. The better you are at really kind of reading people and seeing people and allowing their expressions to affect you. And by affect you, I mean have an emotional response to it. If you're sitting in a park and somebody looks sad, recognize that, hey, wow, this person looks really sad, and really let that affect you, because the more you study those expressions of people you see in everyday life, and the more you let that affect you, the easier it is to look at somebody and be able to see what's true about their expression
Hmm.
and what may not be ringing true about their expression. I grew up spending a lot of time just people watching, and When I was a kid, I used to like go to the mall and like somebody'd be talking on their phone, or and I'd make up stories, backstories for
Mhm.
why they're at the mall or whatever it is. So I think a little bit of role playing in that regard, and really kind of really studying human beings is going to make you a better headshot photographer. There's a lot of times where I don't carry the whole mantra of I take my camera with me everywhere.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
actually don't do that a lot of the time, unless I know I'm going somewhere awesome. But for the most part, I'm always people watching, and part of that comes from like a bartending, acting
Mhm.
background where, as a bartender, I had to learn to speak to anybody about anything at all states of
Mhm.
uh, drunkenness or whatever. So that kind of
But
that
people
taught
then
me.
real, right? So that you can.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, bartending is a little bit like watching two trains kind of head on
Yeah.
collide in slow motion, and everybody starts out sober, and then by the end of the night, so it's an interesting social place too. Bars and restaurants are interesting that way because you'll inevitably see a guy at the end of the bar who looks like he's just drinking away his really
Mhm.
crappy day, or there's you got maybe a couple, and me and my wife actually play a game sometimes when we were bartending where we'd say. A young couple would come into the bar and sit, and they'd be talking at a table or whatever, and we'd go, how many dates do you think they've been on? Have they
Oh, okay.
slept together yet? What's where are they at in this relationship?
Mhm.
Have they kissed yet? Or just by judging their body language and
Mhm.
their expressions with one another, the leaning forward thing that we talk about that I
Yes.
harp on all the time is such a powerful device with a camera because if I'm sitting talking energies, and the
Mhm.
camera picks that up. So um, you can tell a lot by if two people are on a date and the guy's just back like this.
Yeah.
It's like how
They're
what is
not
and that's
engaging now.
that's a very easy example, but you understand the easy ones, and then after a
Yeah.
while you start to understand the more subtle
Yeah,
ones.
but the leaning one, I think, was one of the most powerful things ever. And I think a lot of people kind of completely forget about it.
Yeah,
And it's like, they have even, as you said, like, good lighting and all this stuff, but there is this kind of body language which is so kind of off that takes this whole kind of image completely, to the waste.
yeah.
And I remember when I started pushing this leaning forward, and like I remember even shooting some like CEOs or people from like big companies, and you
They
kind
don't
of
want to do
tell
it.
no, they just like,
They're
why do
like,
I have
what
to
is
do
going
it?
on?
And you
Yeah,
try to explain them the whole concept behind it, and then and even if sometimes I've noticed you don't really see that on the image, like they're leaning forward so the body's kind of back, and the face is forward, and it's not as much visible on the picture, but just make a hell of a difference, right? Like
yeah,
you can see
yeah.
completely.
It's really amazing, and this is another thing I kind of took from the acting world that um, a lot of times when they talk to actors about body language, they'll say things like, you know putting on dress shoes makes you feel and walk differently. Putting on a suit makes you feel and walk differently. So a lot of times, if you can get their body into the position of a universal body language sign for I'm engaged with you, which is leaning forward a
Forward.
little bit, really wanting to know what you're saying,
Yes.
then that emotion will translate in the expression without you ever having to do anything. You don't have to tell them what to think or what to feel, because that was my big thing. I never wanted to tell any clients, all right, I want you to pretend you're a cat in the jungle and you're
Hmm.
hunting something, or whatever. I mean, people use a lot of things. That's just never been my approach. So I found that if you just kind of get the body there, then eventually you'll get the expression out of them because they clicks. They understand why they're doing it. But yes, people often are leaning way more forward
Hmm.
than it appears in the picture. Um, which I think is good for corporate people because as much as they don't want to do it, it's a really once you get them there for like
Yeah.
one or two shots, and how corporate is. Corporate stuff goes quick.
Yes.
You're never shooting anybody longer than 5 minutes or
No.
something if you got 20 of them. And so it kind of, if you can get it in the first few shots by just having them lean forward a little bit, then they look at you like you're just a magician, which is great for repeat business. Um, so that's kind of how
Okay.
I approach that.
Perfect. So my next question is, I just want to ask you, what have changed over the last 10 years in headshot photography, which kind of inspire you the most? Like, what's the changes you have seen, which, kind of like make a hell of a difference right now when it comes to the headshot photography? Because I think looking even like everyone progressed, right, over the years. And then, I'm sure when Peter Harley started his headshot, that was a kind of different story. He's kind of keep continuing this stuff, but then you bring to the table the cinematic look, which I think is more unique, has some more vibrancy to the images. So what have changed in your opinion, which has huge impact on this industry?
Well, man, that's a really good question. I think that trends in the headshot world are always going to be kind of circulating like they would in the fashion world.
Mm-hmm.
The great thing about Peter's work is, initially he was shooting everybody against white for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, and uh, it gave your eye nowhere else to look. Like all you could do was look at the person, and that's a really cool thing. And it's obviously, it works. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's always going to be a place for that. Before Peter, there was a lot of guys doing wider 3/4 shots, which I think will probably start to make a comeback within the acting world. Stuff that's more from the knees up, because basically in the acting world, agents sell an actor, and casting directors hire an actor. So casting directors are the ones I tend to try and shoot a little bit more for, but they always want more information. The more information you can give a casting director, the better. So that's why a lot of my shots, I started not getting so tight. I started pulling back to, the frame we're kind of in now a little bit, to kind of get some of these shoulder informations and information from the jaw and the clavicle area. Whereas sometimes, years ago, the shots were a lot tighter and more just face oriented. So I think it's evolving, but ultimately, I kind of feel like where headshots are, the next step is video.
Mm-hmm.
I think headshots from video or moving headshots. I've been playing around with concepts over the years for a moving headshot image, and I think eventually that's probably where it's going to move to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of hard to say. I feel like there's always going to be a place for the still image, but I don't think that, aside from the standard, you know, horizontal crop and vertical crop, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of massive change.
Okay.
Yeah, there's guys that are doing really amazing natural light work. There's guys that are doing really amazing studio work. There's guys doing really great cinematic work. So I can't imagine where else it would go unless we started doing some sort of creative color toning, like a more cinematic color toning. But I kind of don't see that happening because casting directors want accurate skin tone. You want to see that person as accurately as possible. So there's headshots really do kind of have to live in a box in terms of how much can you do with it. There's a lot of people in LA doing some really cool natural light work that has a very cinematic flair. So I think ultimately there's room for a lot of things, but at the end of the day, it still has to live in a creative box for the industry.
Absolutely.
But I think you can push it a little bit.
We'll see.
Maybe, yeah. Who knows?
Perfect. Okay, so the next thing what I want to actually talk to you, I actually dig into your website and some of your stuff which you've done, and I pick like 6 images which they're my favorite. So I just want to show them to you, and you tell me like a little bit of context to them, maybe some interesting story. So that's the first shot.
Oh yeah.
This is one of my favorites. It's I don't know, the lighting, the everything is just kind of perfect.
So he is, his name is Matt Addison, and he came to me when I was in New York. So the background is the dusk New York blurry out of focus lights, which I've admittedly had a hard time kind of recreating here in LA. I found different areas where I can do it without having to go all the way downtown. But for context, that was shot maybe 15 minutes after the sun went down.
Okay.
He is uh, he was on a Super Bowl commercial since that shot was
Oh, okay.
done. He was on a new series called High Maintenance on HBO. He's done some modeling stuff for GQ. He's
Oh,
also
smoke.
like
Okay.
a drummer in a band. He's a really cool guy. Um, but we that was kind of the end of the session, and we wanted to show that he had tattoos. So if you look at the shot, you can see we said, hey, let's go down to the muscle shirt so that we can show the tattoos on the shoulder, because that is it's that shot for him is something I should mention too. That is it's not his everyday shot. The
Hmm.
dusk shot that you see on my website, those were never everyday use shots for the actor. They're character shots.
Okay.
But he's told me straight up he's gotten work from that shot. So
Well, it
it's
seems like he got a lot of good work too, hey? And
yeah.
everything starts from headshot. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean tattoos. They used to be more taboo, but they're more mainstream now. So I try and
Yes.
showcase them whenever somebody has them, even if it's just an indication. Like there's another shot on my website where a guy's got one on the chest, and it just kind of it gives people another interpretation of their character.
Yes.
So I tend to look at once the client comes, I kind of forget about who they are. I start seeing how they're being photographed, and I go, okay, he's got cool tattoos. Like, let's make that a shot because there's going to be a role out there where you can use that.
Yes.
So it's also about learning to educate your clients on how to use the images too,
Yeah.
because a lot of times your client might pick stuff that isn't as strong. So once they send me a list of their images, I'll tend to go back through and say, hey, you might want to consider this one over this one.
Hmm.
I think you look a little more, edgier or bitchier in this one, which might be good for this particular role. Or, so I think really engaging your clients and helping them see the many different sides of their character, can be helpful to them. There's a lot of people that tell actors, I want you to go in and I want you to get a shot that's guy next door. I want you to get a shot that's, best friend and
Hmm.
blah, blah, blah. And that can put actors too much in their head sometimes. A lot of times you can indicate all those things with, a quick wardrobe change, some lighting, and an expression that matches that. If you're trying to go for the guy that's like the neighborhood barbecue burger flipper,
Yeah.
where everybody comes to his house, maybe he's wearing, one of these shirts and he's
Yeah.
just, hey, how
Yeah.
are you? Maybe we should shave the beard off, clean
Absolutely.
cut, kind of, all American, whatever. So um, there's always a place. I think, a lot of times you just kind of help them find it too. So
For sure. Okay, so I want to show you the next shot. I have six of them, so we have to. Yeah. Well, you will tell
you got to
me.
go quick.
So this one
Wow.
is what I really like about is the face expression, and this is what we talk about the having the lips together, and the eyes, the pose, everything is just kind of work really well in this one.
Mhm.
So can you tell me a little bit?
Yeah. So that's also one of my favorites.
Okay.
A lot for the expression. She just killed it, But there's a lot of things that make that help that expression out. I'm not big that as long as people are wearing clothes that they like, I'm not real big on you have to wear this certain thing.
Hmm.
As long as the colors are kind of neutral and I just say, look, it's more about your expression. But that's a situation where the jacket really helps that expression.
Yes.
If you look at that, that helps that character. What we're looking at is a very much a character influenced shot. She's just recently was on the national tour for Kinky Boots, I believe.
Okay.
Um, on Broadway. She's been working for a very long time. Her name right off the top of my head, Heather Patterson is
Okay.
her name. Had a joy working with her, but that particular day it was cloudy and dark and rain. They'd rained a couple of times. I had told her, I was like, man, we might need to reschedule. She was like, what, let's just do it. It was also cold. It
Hmm.
was early in New York, probably in March, I think, maybe time frame that shot was taken. And we actually had to go to a store and get different hairspray
Hmm.
because it was super windy that day too. So Tresemme number 4
Okay.
is like it's like spraying concrete on
Yeah,
her
yeah.
hair. And so we got it all sprayed down, and it worked out great, and we got a bunch of great shots. But yeah, that was a lot of times what I do is I pick my favorite shot from the
Hmm.
expression or from the session, and I retouch it and send it to them. So the shots you're seeing are all images that I picked for the
Okay.
client
Okay.
most of
Perfect.
the time.
Okay, so this is the next one, and this is
Mm-hmm.
like also one of my favorite
Yeah.
ones. So
Yeah, I
tell me
love
about
that.
that shot.
So he was a character actor.
Okay.
Or he is a character actor. His name, unfortunately, does escape my mind. Um, yeah, I can't remember right off the top of my head, but I do remember in the email communication going back and forth. I thought, oh man, he might be kind of tough.
Okay.
Like sometimes you can kind of tell in the email they're either worried about not looking good or worried about something, or they're unloading all these different ideas on me, and I kind of got to go, okay, wait a minute,
Okay. Yeah.
because like we can't spend all afternoon. But it turned out he was probably one of the easiest sessions I've ever shot. He was so much fun, and he's very much a character actor and knew he's obviously an older gentleman, knew what he wanted,
Hmm.
and so he came in with that character just ready to go. All I had to do was point the camera at the
And
guy.
shoot it. Yeah.
I coached him to lean forward a little bit, but for the most part, he had everything else
Yeah.
taken
And I
care
think
of.
the glasses, everything. There's like a little tiny smile. Is just
Yeah,
everything has like
it's
amazing
it's
balance in that shot.
yeah, it's got all the ingredients. It's
Yeah.
definitely one of my favorites.
Okay, so this one.
Yeah, that's probably one of the more well-known ones. We use that for the tutorial quite a bit.
Yes.
Some people are sick of seeing that shot.
Okay.
That was another situation where uh, we wanted to get her a character shot, and we decided in the pre-shoot consultation that she had the right look, and so I said, look, bring some kind of edgier clothing. Bring, if you got like a funky jacket or a leather
Hmm.
jacket, bring it. You'll notice that we let her keep the earrings in, which is something. This was at the end of the session. She didn't have those earrings in for the entire session, but it played to that character.
Hmm.
That strong African American woman, very urban, very commanding presence, which is something I wanted to have for her. And she's been on a bunch of Broadway tours recently as well. She's also a dancer.
Okay.
Uh, it caught me on the spot because I don't remember it. I really want to be
Oh.
able to remember her name, but
Okay, so I know that shot was taken on one of your workshops, but I
yeah,
really love this shot, the
I,
smile, everything, and I think we had a
yes,
little discussion there. I think
yeah,
at some point that whatever angle you would take, whatever picture you would take would work, right?
yeah. I mean, ultimately, look, it's there's always going to be people that just do this very naturally well.
Hmm.
Bella's been doing a lot of modeling, and she's got a really fantastic, grounded personality. She's also only 16,
Okay.
which
Oh,
is
really? Okay.
amazing. Yeah, uh, just for how beautiful she is and the type of work she's doing, her sense of personality and being really grounded in who she is and not too full of herself or anything like that. All those things really played a part in how well the shoot went. I got that smile in like less than 5 minutes. I mean,
Yeah.
she just I said a couple things. We were going back and forth. She laughed. I went click, and
Boom.
it's an infectious smile.
Yeah.
That's one of those where you can see the eyes and the mouth are just totally on point. And she's got a bunch from that session, but that's hands down the best one.
Yeah. Okay, so the last shot, and I think this is, as you said, this is character. headshot, and this is like one of my also top shots.
Yeah.
And I like the hat, like everything also is something kind of has that magical impact,
Yeah.
which has.
So he is actually the founder of a company called Anti-Gravity Fitness,
Okay.
which is really big. It's gotten really popular with anti-gravity yoga, where he kind of came up with the idea of doing yoga in a hammock from the ceiling.
Oh wow. Okay.
So his name is Christopher. I literally just saw him on Facebook this morning. His first name's Christopher, and he came to me for more press promo related shots. The only thing I'm not crazy about with that shot is he wanted to have makeup.
Okay.
He was very self-conscious. I wouldn't say self-conscious. He wanted makeup. So there's a little more makeup there than I would have liked, but it's who he is and it's what he wanted, so you do it. And the top hat was another thing he brought. Because a lot of times it's also a part of my hat series. For over the years have been telling actors, hey, if you got a great hat that isn't like a baseball hat, bring it with you and we'll do some shots in it, because it kind of creates a character on its own. And we wanted that kind of mystical, magical thing. Initially, he wasn't wearing a purple scarf.
Okay.
But the black hat and the black shirt, we found I was just losing him too much in the background, so we had him throw on the purple scarf to kind of help break that the black up a little bit.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Work well. Okay, so my last question is, what kind of impact would you like to make on headshot photography? The tough one I left to the last one.
That is a tough one. I think at the end of I feel like the impact I've made is been good and positive. Obviously, I think anybody who does a creative endeavor would love to be remembered. I don't really know that 30 years from now anybody's going to remember my name, and that's okay with me. Hopefully, it's hopefully I've been able to help inspire, and maybe that'll trickle down. Maybe somebody studied headshot work with me and Peter Hurley and other people, and they've got a child, and that child ends up growing up to be a headshot photographer. That's a really tough one. Yeah. I don't really know that. There's a lot of people that have kind of left their mark. I mean, Peter Hurley's left his mark with his look and signature style. Before him, one of my early mentors and friends, Ron Rinaldi, shot 30,000 working actors in New York and kind of he popularized the 3/4 shot, which exploded. He also popularized, the shrinking down of a image and putting it on an 8x10 instead of printing it full bleed. So he's left his mark as well. And if I can leave my mark in a similar way, like I feel like I might have, then I'm happy. I don't know that it's an industry that's getting so much bigger with so many people doing it and needing headshots that at the end of the day, if 5 years from now or 7 years from now somebody goes, oh, looks like a Dylan Patrick shot, I'll be happy. That's cool. Yeah. It's I think everybody would love to be recognized for their work, and I think sharing credit with those that have inspired you along the way is part of ensuring that the people that have inspired you the most get the credit that they deserve, whether or not it's on a more popular level than some, or I think it's important to just reflect on where you come from and how people have inspired you around you, and currently people who inspire me.
So, absolutely.
That's a way that we can kind of share that recognition with everybody, because it's akin to most things in the creative world. Artists, writers, painters, all of them would love to be recognized by their peers, and so
absolutely,
sharing credit is a way that we can all do that, I think.
Absolutely. I think you make huge impact on a lot of people, including myself, because I've learned so much from you, and as I said, and then like there is like I have to say that my life also changed, and I started shooting headshots and trying new things. And I remember
That's
watching
awesome.
your tutorial. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I don't care how I'm gonna get there, but that's what I want to do. And then
See
that opened
that
completely new avenue for me. And then I will be thankful for life. So that's kind of my few words.
I'm thankful for you, and you bring a lot of great stuff to our group, and you're doing beautiful work, and uh, it really means a lot to me when people say that. I know sometimes it's hard when you're online and somebody sends you send a
Yeah.
message to somebody, and it's hard to really understand what it makes them feel like. But anytime anybody's ever messaged me and said, "Hey, your work has really inspired me," or "You've really helped me," it really means a lot to me because it it makes it worth it.
Yes.
Conversing with a lot of people and critiquing a lot of work, and it can be very exhausting. And it's nice to know that it's helped people. Just as the people who've inspired me, I'm sure would like to know that, hey, Dylan's doing this thing because he was inspired by Ron Rinaldi and Joe
Hmm.
McNally and Gregory Crudson and all these other people.
Hmm.
So you know, I think that it's all love. I and
Absolutely.
I
So
I
before
really
we
like that.
end it, I have one more question for you, and this is one
Sure.
of the most requested question by some of the people I'm actually my audience is like, so what's the
Okay.
lens do you use?
Yeah, it's always, us photographers are such tech nerds. It's always going to
Yes,
be gear first, everything else later. I use the 70 to 200 VR2 Nikon 2.8. Most of the time, it's 180 to 200 millimeters. But really, for headshots, 105 millimeters and
it's
up
good.
is what I recommend.
Yeah,
85 to me feels too close of a working distance. What I like about the 70 to 200 is it's a little bit like you get to photograph wildlife. You
yes,
get to be back a little bit from the person. You're not right up in their face.
face
And I think that helps calm people down a little bit too when you're not just
in
right
the
up in their
face.
face
Yeah.
trying to frame tight. I also like that compression and out of focus effect that you get with the 70 to 200 at the 200 millimeter
Yeah,
focal length.
yeah.
So
I had to ask this because then I would be bombarded by people
it's
like,
easier
you
to
didn't
shoot.
ask the most important question. So,
Yeah, yeah. No, it's fair. I think it's easier to shoot in a lot of different types of locations with the 70 to
yes,
200. Harder in terms of working distance, but once you get a spot that you can figure out, it's easier to completely lose the background. So if you're shooting in the kitchen, like I know you do,
yeah,
from time to time, or you're shooting somewhere where you really want to destroy that background, a 70 to 200 is going to do it a lot faster than an
faster.
85 will. So
Absolutely. Dylan, that was absolutely pleasure chatting with you. I'm so thankful
I,
that you accept the invitation and you find the time because I know you're going through a lot of stuff right now. And
I
yeah, we covered I think a lot of stuff, which
Yeah,
there is a
yeah.
lot of questions which bugs me for a long time, and you answered them perfectly. So I'm gonna probably also go to those to that interview and just kind of listen to this one more time because there's tons of stuff which I
Awesome.
think is not only inspiring but also informative. So I'm sure a lot of people will be
Well,
exciting to watch this for sure.
it's been my pleasure, and it's great to finally get to chat with you. Besides
All
online
this
stuff,
online
so
stuff, perfect.
yeah.